All right, Alex, thanks for taking the call with me today. I wanted to talk about ErgoHack. We have ErgoHack 3 coming up this weekend. Privacy and security event. How are you feeling about it?
All right, so I'm feeling very excited. So, it's the very special topic, I suppose, because the Ergo Mixer, for example, was the first application on the top of the Ergo blockchain. And then for the security and privacy topic, it's definitely worth to do separate, dedicated hackathon.
Yeah, it's a big topic in this space. You know, security probably means a lot of different things to a lot of different actors. You know, you have what is security for a developer? What is security for like the average user? What is security for a miner? And what are kind of the best practices or principles people can put in place to protect themselves?
So we have actually hundreds of different protocols here, right? From the core protocols, there are more than one. There even two wallets and DApps and so on. A lot of issues on the way also, and also some composability issues, and the crisis of complexity after all, right? If we have so many protocols, and we need to have some understanding of them, and in conjunction even. So that's a very hard topic actually, if we're talking about some security, right, in general.
Yeah, security is one of those things that as the system gets more complex, you have more individual points of failures that start popping up. And every once in a while, you know, and the big one in, let's say, the last week or two was the big bridge hack where somebody spoofed multi-sig and, you know, hit the road with a lot of ETH. You know, and unfortunately, that kind of thing in this space is not terribly uncommon. So then it's a matter of saying like, okay, well, what can we do? What, let's say, best practices or principles can we put in place to prevent that kind of thing?
Right. So that was about cross-chain setting, which is even more complex, right? And in terms of security, pretty terrible actually, right? Because it has cascading failure effects. So it was a bug in Solana standard library, right? And using it, someone minted like 300 million USD in wrapped Ether, right, on Solana blockchain, and transferred like 90K wrapped Ether. Now we have in results. Solana DeFi space, right, is clean of this toxic stolen wrapped Ether, but now Ethereum blockchain, right, is having problem with an insane amount of wrapped Ether in the hands of hacker, right, or hackers. Who knows? Right, and then those stolen funds now can be used to attack DeFi protocols on Ethereum, right? Because of back on Solana. What Ethereum can do in this case, it's probably nothing, right? Just to watch the attacks. Ethereum DeFi community can just watch the attacks. Maybe some contracts may blacklist some addresses, but this won't work. Something like that, right? So now even without flash loans and so on, someone can manipulate prices, right, on different DeFi projects and so on, just using the funds stolen. and so on. And yeah, so it was started on Solana, right? But now we have toxic effects on Ethereum. So this even more terrible, right? In the cross-chain setting.
Yeah. It opens up a big question in my mind. A bridge cross chain really isn't that greatly different in structure than, let's say, a bridge from layer 1 to layer 2. So what can we do to make sure that we choose a solution that is pretty hardened or stable, so we don't see that type of exploit on Ergo?
Yeah, so in regards with layer 2, also, security considerations, not quite clear even in most cases, right? And yeah, there are many questions for existing L2 protocol solutions, like how well mass exit would work for plasma networks like Matic. With congestion, yeah, Ethereum network has been without it, so probably it would be a very terrible scenario. And so on, so on. So yeah, a lot of issues, and yeah, in the first place, most of users don't understand the security assumptions even here. One of the most effective deals here, I guess, would be about stating security assumptions in either way, right, and do that explicitly. Yeah, I'm proposing this informally for some time. To state assumptions, right, for smart contracts, for protocols, and made it in a clear way. So yeah, maybe we can do that for some part of Ergo DeFi at least.
Yeah, I think that
it's about a lot of work, right? And with explosive growth, maybe at some point, we cannot help users in regards with everything, but still, we can do something for those early days at least. Doing proper basis for all the Ergo DeFi.
Yeah, I think this might be a good opportunity to pull in the community and get tutorials together, because there are a lot of different setups for bridges, or whether it's to another chain or to a layer 2, and you do have different builds with different let's say assumptions. You may have a multi-sig where you have one person with 3 wallets. Who knows, right? It can be very difficult to understand, what is the actual setup and security assumption that users are getting into. So I do think that with the KYA, if we kick that to the community in some degree, we could get a lot of support. Users helping users is good.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so in most cases for Ethereum contracts, so there are some possibilities to update contract, right? So it should be stated clearly how a contract could be updated. So usually it's not the case, right? And yeah, so once I was on a call with some guy doing some blockchain project on Ethereum, and yeah, he said that it was early 2020, I believe. So he said that every serious contract on Ethereum now must have a button to freeze, right? So some switch to freeze all the operations. Yeah, but probably most of users don't know about that. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I would imagine that's not too discussed.
Right. Yeah. So unfortunately, these days, users put money into some black box without Without any understanding of even basic failure scenarios, right? And who can control the funds, even who can withdraw them, who can freeze the contract, who can update it, and so on. So even those simplest questions, which are actually not about cryptography, right, or any complex stuff. So even such questions are unanswered. So yeah, that's pretty terrible, actually.
Yeah, it's quite terrible. It opens a big question, though. We want to get to a place, maybe not today, but some point in the future where things are trustless, right? And how do we get to a place that's trustless when users don't even understand the assumptions or powers that exist in the contracts that they use? So hopefully, decentralization requires localization of power, right? The user has to take some responsibility, but we do need to set standards in place of some kind to at least give users the opportunity to understand what they're using. So maybe we should make this a big community initiative, beyond even this hackathon of getting the right questions asked for projects that come and build on Ergo.
Right. Yeah, this would be very beneficial for users.
Yeah. No, so maybe we can put together some sort of community group that will assist in not only educating users but also kind of putting the fire to developers that come and build, saying, hey, if you want to support the community, this is the information that we need to understand what you're actually doing.
Yeah. And also some security audits and so on, right? But so those hacked contracts on Solana, so they were audited, so there is no guarantee after all. But yeah, so this is also about simplicity of contracts, right? And about proper support from the core layer. So for example, in Ergo, so multi-sig is indeed multi-sig, right? So there is no chance to do it improperly. But yeah, in case of Solana, so it was some call to some standard library, and it was possible to call another piece of standard library instead without any check. Then, yeah, instead of multi-sig, you can get some other piece of code working, which is about, increased attacks surface, right? So increased possibilities for attackers to hack the contracts.
Yeah, it opens a good point. We live in an industry at this time that's growing really rapidly, right? And so you only have so many, let's say, talented engineers that an auditing firm can hire to actually review something. So it's hard to even say, let's say we go to a firm and we say, hey, we want to get something audited. Well, who's the actor? And, are they a senior member of that auditing team, or are we going to get a green kid that has been there for 2 weeks and, is fresh on the job? It's hard to say.
Also they're usually just going through some checklist internally, right? So checking against issues already known. So if we are talking about some complex and new beasts like Solana, so this checklist, is far away from being full yet, right? So a lot of issues not known yet. So so security auditors, so they're saving time, right? So they're just checking against issues known. So they're not looking for issues which are yet unknown usually, right? If it's not about some really non-standard job, right? To be paid extra, right? And usually there are no resources even to do some very careful security audit, like people imagine. So usually it's just some standard procedure, it works if the surface is already known, right? So possible attack vectors. For example, in Ethereum, it is working mostly, right? So there are a lot of hacks in Ethereum also, for sure. But yeah, at least for many years. So now there are some security practices to be considered, right? And this is not the case for Solana and other new blockchains. So the solution is to make things simpler, right? I guess simpler contracts are harder to get exploited usually.
Yeah, so trying to build in a way that's simple so the attack vectors are known. And then I think there's a lot of value to, let's say, low risk public betas. But, users don't always listen to that either. You may have, let's say, an application that says, hey, we're running a public beta. Don't put a lot of funds here. Play with it. See if you can break it. And then someone goes in with, all of their different tokens, and it's risky.
Yeah, so there was a case when this guy, Andre Cronje, right? So he deployed some contract, went to sleep, right, without any announcement. And yeah, it was some contract not ready yet for public usage, but yeah, so somehow someone discovered it during his sleep, and yeah, a lot of millions were put into just because people are greedy, right? So they're willing to put money into this guy's contract, even if it's not ready, right? Or just some testing bet, right? So yeah, but what can we do about that? About people's greed, so we cannot do much.
I think all we can do is the know your assumptions. Put it out there for them to read. Hopefully they read it, and hope nobody wakes up in the situation that guy did. I'm sure that's something where you wish you wouldn't have got out of bed quite so early, right?
All right, yeah. So another topic is privacy, right? And so in regards with privacy, so as I said before, Ergo Mixer was the first application on top of the blockchain, right? And Ergo has unique support for cryptographic protocols to be done on layer 2, right? On the but on the application level, so not as a part of the protocol. So unlike Monero, for example, which made a lot of forks to upgrade its cryptography. Unlike Heaven, for example, which had a lot of funds being stolen because of a bug in the core protocol. Unlike Zcash, which had a bug in the core protocol, which fortunately did not lead to funds being stolen, but yeah, it was possible anyway, and so on, right? So here we have different levels, right? So the core protocol would be secure anyway, right? Even if some cryptographic protocol on the application level is compromised. Right, and yeah, also this is about optional privacy, right? So if you wanna achieve some privacy level, so you are using corresponding solutions, otherwise not, right? So there is no anything mandatory here, but unlike mixers for Bitcoin, for example, which are working off-chain, and then you have a lot of problems with malicious operators, right, with surveillance over such services, and so on, with participants, right, in the protocol, for example, who are tracking you and so on, right? So here, you are working with blockchain directly, like in case of Monero, Zcash, and so on. right? So it's about then in terms of experience, like working with privacy coin, right? Which is just an application, level 1 application. And yeah, so for composability with layer 2 solutions, I guess there are also some unique possibilities, but this space is not covered yet at all. So maybe it would be an interesting topic for some hackathon like 2 years after. Let's see. So there are some interesting schemes. So instead of doing, for example, off-chain money transfers using Lightning Network, right? So to issue terminal digital cash, right? So some untraceable digital cash on layer 2, which is collateralized by layer 1 deposits. So it's kind of Lightning Network, but yeah, also untraceable. There are such constructions on the paper, at least. So, maybe at some point it would be interesting to get implementations around.
Well, that's what Ergo's been all about, is starting from papers and then slowly building them into reality, right?
Yeah, so in regards with Ergo Mixer, so not much time passed even. So the paper was published in 2019. Yeah, so it was second half of 2019, and implementation appeared like 6 months after, right? So I mean, for the space, it's very fast actually.
Yeah, it was a quick turnover.
All right. I mean, the initial version of Ergo Mixer, so it was done by another Anon, so Anon 92048. So the mixer you can use now. So it's done by Anon 2020S, but yeah, it was appeared quickly also, like 3 or 4 months after the initial mixer. Which had some very simple design from 90s, right? And yeah, not much features. But anyway, so it was pretty usable, so I used it before Anon 2020S mixer. And yeah, so currently the Ergo Mixer has an API even, so it's possible to build applications on top of the mixer, which is also quite interesting idea. And yeah, I don't know about any other mixer which is having API, right, and allowing to build applications on top of it. And yeah, also, I don't know about any other blockchain where you can build cryptographic protocols on the application level, right? L1.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any either. The privacy coin space has always fascinated me. It tends to be one of the communities that I enjoy, interacting with, listening, following, because they usually pay more attention to security assumptions versus, sometimes other blockchains are much more, let's say, DeFi and how can I get a return oriented, which, I can understand, but a lot of the times people don't really understand what they're getting into. So I've always kind of enjoyed that about the privacy coin community, is that tends to be more of a serious approach when it comes to assumptions. But I can't say there's
right. And so yeah, we are in friendship with some privacy coins, as you know. So like Pirate Chain. So we both are in BBCA. And yeah, CCX we have partnership with. And yeah, also there is some privacy coin Well, a representative from it will make a video for our privacy event coming after the hack. So stay tuned. So yeah, it's pretty well known privacy coin in the space.
That's great.
One of the top ones.
You know, it's interesting that one segment, I would say, of crypto, the privacy coin space, the privacy space, is probably the one that I think needs to focus more on interoperability in order to, let's say, grow faster and evolve, right? It seems like with the DeFi driven portion of the market, there tends to be that desire to, let's say, get, liquidity and, work together to, let's say, usually increase, the exposure to market. I would love to see something, evolve. And I know the BPSAA is certainly a very good start. I'm very, impressed with what Drath has put together, trying to create more of a collaborative community and development around privacy and security. What do you think about that in terms of, let's say, future partnerships and how Ergo and other privacy coins can work together to support that?
Yeah, so I think bridges definitely needed. Yeah, so it would be possible to buy, for example, CCX on ErgoHacks, right? So in case of crackdown for privacy coins on centralized exchanges, so you can buy them on DEX at least, right? And yeah, you can maybe mix them on top of the Ergo in the first place, then send through a bridge, right? And then mix, well, on another blockchain, right? So CCX. Then, yeah, it's about totally different level of privacy, I believe. Right, because, yeah, it's evolving well, privacy tech right here and there. So yeah, it's definitely better.
So do you have any privacy tech you've had your eye on that you find most interesting lately? I know that's always an evolving space, but you tend to be the one that's reading all the papers that are coming out. Anything caught your eye?
Yeah, so the schemes are more or less stabilized, I guess, for privacy coins. So yeah, there are a lot of improvements coming. So mostly from Hello to zero knowledge province scheme. So there are improvements in regards with. So Hello to support is coming to Zcash. So in regards with other approaches, so there is Lilantus protocol in Zcoin now Fira, which is also quite interesting. Well, not checked carefully by the community, cryptographic community yet, maybe, but yeah. It's also not so complex, right, as Snark's stuff. And yeah, so there is some progress still, so especially in regards with tools, right? So zero knowledge proving systems. So in regards with mixing schemes themselves, so I think well the space is stabilized, so schemes are known, problematics known, so just some better tooling is needed. So some better primitives like Hello 2, which is already coming.
And what do you think about, if I were to change that same question, what do you think about different bridge frameworks that are coming out? I know, you can only read so much, but have you seen anything in the bridge space that you find more interesting than what's already existing?
Oh, so unfortunately, the space is still relying mostly on some multi-sig, right, from just few participants. Yeah, I don't know. So there are some approaches which are claiming to be superior. So using thousands of signers, for example, but then yeah, implementations are closed, so source code is closed.
Yeah. So who knows?
Yeah, the schemes are not verified carefully. So yeah, so this space is definitely definitely young still, so very young. So we need for much more work here. And yeah, it's would be good to get bridging schemes with better security assumptions, right? So not just multi-sig. But yeah, it's a very open question.
Well, I guess that's something we're going to have to track and follow. You know?
Yeah, so would be good to get into this also. So yeah, it's the very hot topic. So it was very hot in 2021, and I guess in 2022 it will be even hotter.
Yeah, I imagine that, as we see exploits, there's just going to be more of a motivation to build some more secure framework for that. So it's an exciting part of, let's say, the R&D part of the crypto space to watch.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, also more secure layer 2 solutions, right? So security considerations here.
Yeah.
Security assumptions are not well investigated even. And yeah, so there are also much more topics here, right? So in regards with proof of stake blockchain, so staking versus DeFi yield, right? So if it's more profitable to put money into DeFi than why to stake, for example, right? Still, this question is not answered.
And yeah, that gets complex. It's like I know there are some people that are saying, okay, well, we're gonna race for the stake snapshot, and then try to race back into a DeFi position, and who knows what that's going to do to APYs and rates, and it seems pretty unpredictable, I would say, at this point.
Yeah, so it's very complex stuff. So the same for a lot of protocols which are relying on so-called crypto economic security. So it was popular a few years ago to consider using game theory to get security properties right for crypto economically secure schemes, right? But the problem is that game theoretical results are very much dependent on initial conditions, right? So if you change initial conditions just a little bit, you can get totally different results. Then, as you're always working with simplified model and reality is quite different from your model, right? Then in reality, things are often working in totally different way than predicted and so on. I think the whole space is an uncertain state, right? So if game theoretical results are not good, then what can you do with those crypto economically secure schemes? So you can just do some guesses, right? And this also not very secure approach, definitely.
That opens up actually a really good question. We're working on EIP 27, right?
Right.
Which is a process of transferring the let's say crypto economic security and voting powers to the miners in Ergo. And a lot of the times I see in the space this mentality like, oh, we're just going to trust the algorithm, right, in terms of emission and whether or not the security subsidy is going to make sense. And I think to some degree people forget that that algorithm is not like a self-learning, self-correcting algorithm. It's just something that somebody came up with and then launched into the unknown, and I guess hope that it holds, right? So having a amendable or adaptable, let's say, emissions period is kind of new. So what do you think that has in terms of the impact on the long-term security of mining in Ergo?
Oh, I see. So when you have subsidies, right? So security is a simpler topic always, right? So, well, miners are just getting subsidized, and that's it. So without subsidies, so this is quite complex topic. Right. So for Bitcoin, for example, so there were some models showing instability of the consensus protocol, right? When subsidies will be well small enough, right? So not just over completely, but small enough to incentivize certain attacks, right, against the consensus. So then it's a big question. So from I mean truly kind of libertarian point of view, right? So I mean having economy which is working on subsidies, right, and insecure without them is not a good option, right? But yeah, on other hands, well, if you don't know a better solution, then what can you do, right? So yeah, so for Bitcoin, I guess, well, we will see some interesting stuff maybe in like 6, right, or 10 years. So after like 2 or 3 halvings.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, 1 or 2 even, right? So after 3 halvings, so it will be mostly about transaction fees, right? So they will dominate, and yeah, it would be very different dynamics, right? Very different miners' behavior, and hard to say what could it be about, right?
Yeah, it's very hard to say. I imagine when that system launched, there was no, let's say, pre-knowledge that you were going to have, something like Lightning come along in order to escape fees, right? And then it's like, okay, well, if the majority of value starts to move into layer 2 and try to escape fees, how does that change the transition to the fee model? I have no idea.
Yeah, so it was planned by Nakamoto, but without any details, right? So, and yeah, so Nakamoto also failed about one CPU, one watt assumption, right? So it was considered that the network would be supported by a lot of CPU, right? Well, maybe GPU miners. And then if you have powerful entities with ASICs, right, which can do a lot of powerful things, so it's quite a different security model even, right? And in this model, so it's hard to say how well a fee-based economy would work. So actually, maybe it would work for Ethereum because of MEV, so miner extractable value, right? But users don't like MEV, right, for some reasons. But I don't know. So to me, it's also a kind of subsidized scheme, right, where DeFi users are paying for others, right? And I mean, it could be fair, even considering that DeFi users are creating heavier loads on the system.
Yeah.
But this kind of fairness maybe not quite understandable, right? So most of users are not happy about MEV, right? Where miners are getting from rewarding extracting knowledge and play against DeFi transactions, right? And they're extracting profits, and by extracting profits, they can process like ordinary transfers, right? Maybe charge less even from them. So yeah, it's also a very complex game, so hard to predict how it will end in the Ethereum land.
Well, that's one thing I like about Ergo's amendability in terms of the ability to shift a subsidy if needed. Security In some sense, yeah, it needs to be, proactive, but it also needs to be reflexive in some sense, where, depending on what's built, how conditions change, some adaptability, it could be very valuable in this space.
Yeah, and so yeah, I think well, if EAP 27 will be passed, so the network will be secure definitely for well, many years ahead, and then so the most interesting things will happen about year 6 maybe, right? I mean the most interesting things from ones which can be predicted. Right, so then we will know how storage rent would work, right? So and what to do with it. So there could be a lot of interesting properties, right, of the storage rent economy. We don't quite know, especially considering seizing assets, right, if not enough Ergs to cover storage rent fee. So storage rent fee also can be quite uneven, right? So for one block, it could be a lot. For another, it could be almost nothing. So maybe it would be needed to tweak things a little bit, right? Like to spread rewards more evenly via some remission contract again, or something like that. So it's hard to say even at this point. What would be that about the storage rent based economy?
Sure, and one thing that we have going for us is we are building out the system of governance to miners. So it's not even necessarily something that we have to decide. It's just something we can propose and allow kind of an organic debate and solution for.
Yeah, and even more interesting. So for transaction fees, for example, so there are no any requirements from the core protocol. So actually, miners along with users can do quite complex games here. So, for example, to redistribute some part of transaction fees, right? Or to send them to a remission contract, or maybe to spread them evenly using some contract also. Right, and for that, no code developers are needed even, right? So it's just about, applications, setting some contracts as fee, right? And then miners, which do need to recognize such contracts as paying fee, actually. And sorting, doing proper sorts, right, in regards with other possible contracts. So it could be a very complex system after all, right? And this is not part of the protocol even, so could be done in many different ways, and even more for some contracts, there could be only partial support from miners, right? So some miners can include certain transactions, and others will reject it just because transactions are paying a fee in some non-standard way, right? So it could be a very interesting game after all.
I'm excited to see how it all unfolds. The beauty of it is with governance in place, the community gets to decide much more than the developers. And, that's something that's relatively new. Miner controlled proof of work system, is that has the complexity that Ergo has is pretty new to the space.
Right. Yeah, because in Bitcoin, so fee is just implicitly assumed as a part of the core protocol. So in Ethereum, it's also part of the protocol, right? So there are some parameters which can be set by miner, but otherwise, the contract, the fee contract is set into the core protocol. So in Ergo, it's not part of the core protocol, and then there is possibility to do experimentation here without changing anything. So without introducing forks or well, whatever. So without touching the core protocol, a lot can be done.
You know, that's one of the best parts of proof of work is that it allows the user to enter the space with full privacy in place. You know, the miner can mine, and you know, there's not necessarily a direct link to their identity, you know, with their token rewards versus, you know, a lot of other protocols. You simply have to either have mined something and have some pre-existing tokens to move around, or you need to transfer money, which, you know, kind of brings you into the sight line of whoever's watching, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so in the first place, you need to get tokens somehow, right? And yeah, so usually, here you can be tracked, potentially at least.
That's, you know, in my opinion, that's one of the most powerful things about proof of work is that you can, anybody in the world with an internet connection and the right hardware can enter the space without anybody's permission.
Right. Yeah. So this is quite exciting, right? Especially if you have also DEX, right, and other decentralized financial tools and instruments, right?
Yeah, it gives you access to an entirely new economy without any permission.
Yeah, and so you cannot be censored, right? So filtered out of it. So yeah, this is totally a new level, I believe.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to, let's say, the first principles. I know the Ergo Manifesto came out and it tried to lay out, let's say, the principles that let's say, of the network we're trying to build, and you know, open and permissionless is there at the top.
Yeah. So it's the top principles here. And the technical means then just sharing, right? The principles, after all.
That's the ideal. You know, it's a funny thing. You know, decentralization is really a very beautiful philosophy. Sometimes in reality, it's a little bit messier. You know, when you take into account, let's say, the markets and media and, you know, a lot of politics beyond the actual technology and, you know, different sizes of actors. What do you think is needed to, let's say, promote and really secure that philosophy moving forward?
Oh, but So what do you mean exactly?
Well, within Ergo, what can we do to support decentralization? You know, we don't have any power.
Yeah, so there are a lot of means, right, of decentralization. So I mean, on every level, we need to do better, right? So iterating every day to do things a little bit better. So in regards with decentralization of development, for example, right, we need to have more contributors and so on. Then, so for decentralization of mining, I don't know what can we do, right? If those we are about Ergo Foundation, for example, because mining is totally separate fields, right? Existing per se, so it's better, right? That it's existing without any interventions. Then so for the app, so it is good to have standards, I believe, right? Like for NFTs and so on, so to check that those contracts are secure, right? So that's they're protecting users, right? So hash of the artwork is there, for example, right? Not just URL. So it was an article by Moxie Morgan Spike recently showing that you can actually sell different pictures on different auctions, right, for the same NFT. For Ethereum auctions, right, because standard is allowing that. Yeah, dApps know your assumptions, right? So having diverse fields of dApps, right? Having competition here. Also, having dApps doing fundraising mostly around communities, right? So not VCs, because, well, VCs after all means centralization, right? So well, even if some VC puts money into the DApp right on top of Ergo, then yeah, potentially, and it could be the case very easily. So they will come to core developers also, right, to lobby some changes in the core protocol and so on, right? So it's better than to avoid them, but on the other hand, so it's up to the apps teams, right? So how to attract funding, and yeah, so some VCs maybe not bad at all, and so on. So it's complex game, right? After all,
It's very complex. You know, money in politics, man. Even in the real world, it's very complex.
yeah. So yeah, it's even more complex in the real world, I believe, and also not so transparent, right? Then yeah, it's hard to say about some things. Certainly, right.
Sure.
So yeah, well, it's easier, right? Maybe because it's still pretty small community, but yeah, also it's much more transparent, right? Well, by how it was constructed.
And you know, to be honest, I think that's really the answer. That the best thing we can do is be transparent and encourage open source development, and you know, get people to understand the assumptions of that development.
Yeah, right. So yeah, it's very important to have open source like everything,
Yeah,
right?
and that,
Yeah,
you know,
it's good for security also.
that seems to be something that the crypto space as a whole is slowly getting away from, at least from my perception. You know, where you're getting more closed source builds and more private repositories, and you know, I don't, I'm not so happy to see that. You know.
Yeah, so even more so, some modern blockchains, such as Avalanche, for example. The only validators can see the mempool, for example, right? So if you want to track mempool, then you need to put some significant stake to be validator. Right, but then yeah, it's definitely not transparent and yeah, not fair, right? So those validators are having not just having MEV, right? So minor acceptable value, but also there is no transparency about how they're profiting, right, from it,
Yeah, that
and
seems to be. I
this
don't
is
know. This
completely different level.
the space seems to be moving away from that basic principle. If you want something to be, you know, trustless, whatever that means, you at least need to have it open source to where people can understand what they're trusting, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, I do think that having that in place, it prevents a lot of scams, and it also prevents a lot of drama.
Yeah, also can be more secure, right? So if some UI is open source, then yeah, even in case of being shut down, well, the initial team disappeared, so it can be deployed, right, and
Resurrection, yeah.
reused and so on. So new iterations can be done using it, and so on. So yeah, so. I guess it's very useful for ecosystem development also, right? So that's everything is open sourced currently in the Ergo ecosystem.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of developers work together through that open source community model, and you know, I do think that accelerates things and makes them better. And recently, I've seen a lot more community engagement in terms of like interacting with betas and finding bugs, and then letting the developers know, and then you have open source changes. So I think that's a really good path for building mindshare.
Yeah. So, well, it's a very exciting atmosphere after all.
Yeah, and ErgoHack really, in some sense, I think that's kind of what it represents, right? It's kind of like the open source, let's say, competition, but also collaboration. Because if we
Yeah,
look at the,
well, basically the spirit of open source money movement, right?
yeah, so I think that's the best thing we can do for decentralization on Ergo is just promote that.
Uh, yeah, so kind of spirit of open source money movement, you mean?
Yep.
Yeah, sounds exciting.
I'm
I'm all
excited
for that.
to see what people come up with this time. It's I think this is going to be a big hackathon for us. Now, I've heard that, rumor is there's another hackathon that, at least is in the framework stage or planning. Do you want to speak to that at all?
You mean next hackathon?
Yeah. What do you have in mind?
Yeah, so still, well, it's been discussed. So, yeah, likely it will be about, well, the DeFi space, right? DeFi ecosystem. So, hopefully it will be done in conjunction with, well, ecosystem projects such as ErgoDex, maybe ErgoPets. So, on Rails projects and so on, right? And it will be centered around, well, voting, staking solutions, applications on top of DEX, right? So doing more kinds of liquidity pools, bonding curves, financial primitives like stable coins, financial instruments, and so on, so on, so on. Yeah, so quite exciting hackathon.
I think
I
we're
guess.
in for a good year in 2022.
Yeah, I think yeah, it will be very busy, but also very productive year.
Well, is there anything else that you want to cover?
I think we covered a lot already, right? So from the core protocol to DApps to bridges to well, philosophical principles to whatever. So yeah, let's finish here. So I guess it was a very nice talk.
Always nice talking to you, my friend.
Yeah, and yeah. So thanks everyone listening to us.
Yep, enjoy ErgoHack.